of English. I told them that I would publish a video here from London, England, from this old place, but actually pretty effective for that what I want to, which is giving you those research, those investigations, those things about books, movies, music that I think are good and valuable for you if you like to practice English, business, motivation, pep talks, you name it. And first of all, remember, phonetics and pronunciation. You repeat, you imitate, you go over and over again because sometimes the question is persistence and practice. Michael Keaton's video when he depicted Ray Kroc in the movie The Founder, a very interesting movie about the history of McDonald's. You might agree or disagree or if this is true or not. I read the book, I watched the movie, and actually I do believe 52-year-old man starting a business out of the blue. I mean, being almost bankrupt, you could say, and then pulling it off. Amazing, awesome. And then you say, what is the only secret so that you practice this singular word? Practice this word. Ray Kroc, the movie, the founder, Michael Keaton. And he says, persistence, persistence. And you write again because I wrote there in my own agenda, persistence. You could say it's a synonym of perseverance or continuity, definitely. And out of one simple reason, and please practice here your English, your business English. Why persistence? Out of the simple fact that when you do something and you try that again, your brain recognizes specific patterns, what works, what doesn't work. So when you go the first step and it doesn't work, your brain knows, like in a maze, how to see the way, how to find the way out. And then the second time you try again, your brain thinks, okay, here is not working either. So I go over again. The third time you do it, then you will see that your brain starts recognizing specific ways to do things better, to optimize things. And that is actually how we evolve as humans, because we persisted along the way. If you go back in time, if you believe in anthropology and you study a little bit of it, and by the way, I recommend you the book Sapiens by the Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari. Well, Professor Harari writes something awesome. His book Sapiens is definitely, in my opinion, the best book ever. Why? Because in that book, he tells you the history and the stories behind those histories we used to believe in. And then when you go back and you confirm, you check online is very easy and you confirm because for you the intention is verification. Then you see that is definitely possible what he is suggesting in that particular book. And that is why you always say history for us from the discovery of fire until today is what? Persistence. We persist. We do, of course, progress control because you do need to evaluate your results. But at the end of the day, it comes to it that in any business, any endeavor, anything that you try to do, any startup, it's important for you to see pros and cons and where you advance, where you didn't advance, and all of the things that you have there. My advice to my students, my people is always to say, time, thoughts, actions in your advantage. Why? When I evaluated this, when I start doing that, then I recognize where I lost my time, what kind of philosophy was convenient for me and not. And then I said, that is actually how things get done. Normally I was surfing on the internet, and then I saw a couple of good videos, then pep talks, the classical way. But then I started doing that in a very frequent way, in a very recurrent way, over and over and over again. So I was rewiring my brain because I said, well, I only have one life. Why not being here kind of optimistic about things? I did know that I had to work. Of course, work has to be there. But then I say, is that hard work or smart work? And then I thought about that lesson in 19th century, where people used to work like 15 and 20 hours. Mostly kids. You can verify that online. Most of the workers during the Industrial Revolution in England, they were kids, children, because they were the only ones that were able somehow to work. It's kind of contradictory in history. But then you say, okay, it's important that you have this kind of persistence and you work. But then you say, you do need integrality because you do have other aspects of your life that you cannot neglect. So at the end of the day is how you distribute time in a wise manner. And then I thought about one man, I like to mention him in here. I read a couple of biographies of these men that I admire a lot from the things that I know. This man is Steve Jobs. Why Steve Jobs? Because despite his, I would say, disadvantages, he was an adopted Syrian kid and he only studied one semester. You can read that in the biography and in the movie. And then you say, still, he somehow pulled it off, creating one time, I mean, a couple of years ago, the number one company in the world. And he was not even an engineer. And then you say, oh, how come that he did that? And then you could say, yeah, well, he imagined that, he projected that, he somehow that is like what you could say is the best definition for smart working. Of course, he was working many, many hours, of course, definitely. But there was a time where he was just thinking how to make things better, how to create the iPad, iPhone, and all inventions, all the things that he created. And then you say, 1985, he was fired from the first Apple version. Apple is the pronunciation here. So the first company that he created fired him. The one guy that was supposed to be the marketing expert turned out to be a failure. And at the end of the day, Apple was almost bankrupt. Then he came back. He rescued the company again, made that company the number one. So this is a fact. And then you say, is that something that you should recognize as something worth to be considered? Yes. Why? Steve Jobs is a reference. Many people hate him, whatever. But at the end of the day, he was in many points right. So what I recommend my students, business is like, you should take the best from every single individual because they have mistakes, failures, who is perfect. But then you say, yes, that is precisely the point in here. That you say, this guy wanted to do the best out of the things that he had. That's very important to consider. And then over again, you say, good, that is one example in history. The second one, people today, when I listen to Joe Rogan's interviews, mainly about Elon Musk, I admire the guy a lot. There is this biography written by Ashley Barnes, where they say what kind of childhood he had in South Africa, in Pretoria specifically, how he had difficult times when his parents got divorced, but there was only one consistent fact that you can read throughout all this biography. And you can check that online too. Remember, verify all what I say. As Buddha used to say, don't believe anything in what I say. Just go out and verify. Check it out, really. And then I remember that in that book, the only consistent factor in Elon's life was he was a reader. He read day in, day out. He was so focused in getting data and data and data that at the end of the day, you say, how come that he was then later on, years later, able to program, for example, a video game when he was 12? Lots and lots of data in his head. You could say, yes, when you have plenty of information in here, your brain has such a capacity to do things that for us seem to be impossible, superhuman. But then you say, well, actually, it's because maybe we underestimate or we underuse our brain. We don't use all opportunities. We don't go for it, so to speak. When you go back and see, for example, Elon's life, and he was reading about all possible subjects and topics and everything, you say it's only logical that he came to deductions that actually other people didn't. And then you say, yes, it's possible for him to connect the dots. And remember, those dots mentioned in one speech by Steve Jobs, yes. When your brain has that kind of information, when your brain has all the data to connect ideas, is easier, so to speak. And that is why the big danger, and I believe that too. I don't believe in all the things that Elon Musk says. I don't agree, definitely. It's my own personal perspective. But I do agree on one thing. The bigger threat that we as human beings have is precisely AI, artificial intelligence, which is only logical when you see Google, when you see YouTube, when you see even TikTok's algorithm. They have such an accurate capacity to interpret that what we're able to do. Maybe I am going to turn into a next public enemy when AI in the future listens to this. But the idea is this: we have come to an age where we are just surfacing information. We don't go deeper into some topics, and then we pretend to have solutions. And sometimes we get bored, so we just move on the next video that entertains us. And maybe somehow it's good for us to stop a single moment and then say for a minute, is that maybe worth that I read, analyze, think a little bit more about it? It could be interesting for your brain to say, okay, you watch, let's say, any kind of conference or anything that you see in TED. I always recommend TED, Technology, Entertainment, Design channel. And then you say, why not having my own thoughts on one particular issue, one particular topic? You sit down and write them down, write your ideas. When you do so, you have the sensation that somehow it's really important for your brain, only for you. And then you just write down like a brainstorming, again, all your ideas. It's even good for English practice. I mean, this is a golden practice. And then you go over and over again to some ideas that are maybe viable, makeable, some ideas that could turn into a reality. And then you say, yes, that's definitely possible. And that is how actually today, when you see lots and lots of entertainment, people, let's say in the X Factor, talent show, and whatever, awesome, amazing. But sometimes I have discovered that my brain would like me to do something smarter, something that is more productive, something that is really solving my particular challenges, issues, and problems. And then I say, yes, why not brainstorming, sitting down and working? This is so important for the human being, for the brain. And of course, today, when you see a person like in the past, Steve Jobs, or today, Elon Musk, people that spent, and many other scientists as well, definitely. And they don't sit down. I mean, they sit down and work in a particular topic, and then they say, okay, let me find some solutions in here. Let me think about it. Most people today, they take certain decisions for granted. And I always think back in one guy that he somehow, being very young, is another listening exercise for you. When he discovered that, for example, his friend died of a pancreatic disease, cancer, precisely according to the description in the video, he started to gather the data. See, he said Wikipedia, Google Wikipedia, to discover actually what went wrong there. And then he discovered that it was, first of all, his friend, very treasured friend by his family, didn't have enough money to pay the pancreatic test. It's like $300 or something. And he discovered a way to make it cheaper, like $2, $3 cost. So, of course, when he wrote to the 200 doctors in Harvard, I think, mostly, they rejected him. Only one said maybe. And then Jack Andraka is the name of the boy, went after him. And then he discovered, then he investigated. Then my question is, why not all of us doing something similar to this? Why not that we somehow get the information together and think about something and then look for ways and means to find a particular solution? I mean, of course, sometimes many things are overwhelming, but it's also overwhelming the amount of people that just don't do anything about things, And then I say, that is how we human beings are so vulnerable today. And that is why today you see the big difference about people that research and investigate. Really, I mean, you would call them nerds, and the others just people that only get entertained. And then you see this gap getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So in the future, most probably, you see nerds in one particular field dominating some areas of the planet, and others are just being put there as bystanders, so to speak, or people, like I said, that like to get entertained but never go deeper into some topics. And that is when you establish a big difference in here. And I like to record that in here so that you remember that in many cases it's important for you just to say, okay, my accountability for the things that I have to investigate, research, and then find the particular solutions. And the final thing that I'd like to say in here is one thing that I have discovered, which has worked for me and might work for you as well, which is, what is the biggest day in November? My opinion. And in this, I agree totally with Americans, which is, why not being thankful? Why not having this Thanksgiving Day, but your personal one, your really inner one, where you say thank you for all the things that you have. Most people worry about clothes, dates, superficialities, and I agree, of course, sometimes one way or the other might be important. But in other cases, it's important for you to say, I like to develop the sense of gratitude, just being thankful for that, what I have, because it's so much easier for my brain to go from there and create more abundance, to get more flow in my abundant life. As the great psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi says in his book, The Flow. There's also a conference in TED about this topic. Flow, he says, Flow, where he says that everything happens and everything, is like flowing in there. Of course, he describes a particular area of the brain, but what I like to say with this is precisely this. Be thankful so that you say, for the things and tools that I have, because I have the capacity to assimilate information, for the things that I can do in my work, in my job, to discover maybe other opportunities when I read a little bit more and research a little bit more, to be thankful for people that are around me and supporting me, the real ones. My people that really support me. So be thankful for that too. And for health, for you. Tell yourselves that you are thankful for their work. And then you will see that they assimilate this message. What Dr. Joe Dispenza once said, that your inner body listens to you, that is true. And that is backed up by many scientists. You can verify yourself. And then you will see, yes, the sense of gratitude that you can develop in November, so important. To be grateful for all the things that you have, no matter what. Because sometimes we pretend that everyone is listening. No. You have to listen to yourself first. When you know, for example, that yes, I like to thank for all the things that I have so that my brain can create out of the things that I have now more. And then sometimes we worry too much about what other people say. And it's understandable. We human beings like to have recognition, but in other cases, maybe that recognition is not something that we definitely need for all the things that we like to do. And that is when I say November. I mean, October, Halloween, but November, definitely Thanksgiving. Developing the sense of gratitude to create abundance in your life. It has worked for me and it has worked for many other people. And sometimes the final thing that I would like to say here, I was speaking about this with a friend, and I told him, listen, I don't worry about other guy having a BMW, Mercedes, or Ferrari. That is his deserving or work, or whatever. I have to worry about the things that I can create for myself, because it's so much easier for my brain from this very inner point to create the rest of the things. If I tell to my brain, listen, I can start from this point, and then I name, like in a brainstorming, all the things that I can create or I have created so far, it's much easier than my brain sees for many other possible options. And that is when I say sense of gratitude. I cannot compare myself with other people because it's difficult. It's actually kind of illogical. We in the universe have different positions in the space and time, so it's very difficult. The starting points are different for every single one. But if I value that, what I have is much easier, like I said, for my brain to create so much more. So the final thing here is, if you have the opportunity to read, to put the proper information, to put the good things here in your brain, like when you get an app for your cell phone, the same for your brain, get the best possible information in here for the things that you would like to do. You would like to create in life for your own, and work and create and go after it. Why? You have only one life. You don't need other people knowing what you're doing. You do need to know that what you're doing. So much better for you, so much better for your life, for your brain. And like I said before, sense of gratitude. And I am totally convinced that all the abundance that you're seeking for is coming. I mean, is getting to your life. That's the message for today. Thank you for the time. Thanks a lot. Shake, as Chinese people used to say. And see you.